It was night. The sea was rough. And Peter was fully conscious. He climbed down from the boat, stretched his leg,
and placed his foot on the moving water.
What supported his body for a few seconds? Miracle is not in the matter. It's in the support.
Before continuing, leave a like, subscribe to the channel and stay until the end, because the details coming now are almost never explained in this way. Peter's walk upon the waters. 3 a.m, total darkness, a wooden boat being destroyed by waves in the middle of the Sea of Galilee, 12 exhausted men rowing for over 9 hours, muscles in collapse, unable to advance even a single meter. And then, at the darkest point of the night, a figure appears, walking upon the roiling water. What happens in the next minutes will change forever the way we understand the limits between the possible and the impossible. Because one of these men is going to do something that no human being has ever attempted before. He is going to get down from the boat and step where there is no ground. But before arriving at this moment, you need to understand what happened in the previous hours, because nothing of that night was an accident. Hours before, Jesus had performed one of the most witnessed miracles of his entire ministry. 5 loaves, 2 fish, and a multitude of more than 15,000 people fed until there were leftovers. 12 baskets full of food, 1 for each disciple to carry back. That was not a common day. That was a day when the impossible became lunch. And it is exactly here that the story takes an unexpected turn. Jesus did not let the moment transform into celebration. Matthew records that he immediately ordered the disciples to enter the boat and go to the other side of the sea. The word in the original Greek carries urgency, almost desperation. Why? The Gospel of John reveals the motive. The multitude planned to take Jesus by force to make him king. He needed to disperse the multitude, but he also needed the disciples far from there. So the 12 departed, alone, without Jesus, towards the other side of the lake. It seems a simple crossing. 10 kilometers of water, experienced fishermen, men who grew up on that lake, who knew every current, every wind, every change of mood of those waters. The boat they used was probably similar to what archaeologists discovered in 1986 during a severe drought that exposed the bottom of the lake. Known today as the Jesus boat, this vessel of the 1st century measured 8 meters in length by 2.5 meters in width. Built with 12 different types of wood, including cedar and oak, the boat could carry up to 15 people. But here is the important detail. It had no cabin. It had no protection. It was a completely open hull where the occupants remained exposed to everything: wind, rain, waves, cold. But that night would be different from all others. The Sea of Galilee has a characteristic that few know. It sits 209 meters below sea level, surrounded by mountains of up to 900 meters. This creates a treacherous meteorological phenomenon. The cold air that descends from the mountains collides with the warm air of the depression and generates violent storms in a matter of minutes. Waves of 2-3 meters surge from nothing, and when the wind blows against you, every stroke becomes a lost battle. That night, the lake chose fury. The text of Matthew uses a specific word to describe the situation of the boat. The Greek word is basanizomenon. Do you know where else this word appears in the Bible? In descriptions of torture. The boat was not rocking, it was being tortured by the sea. And here comes the detail that changes everything. The disciples rowed for over 9 hours. 9 hours. Think about what that means. A fishing boat of that era weighed more than 1,000 kilos. The oars were of solid wood, 10 kilos each one. Each stroke demands strength from the back, shoulders, arms, abdomen. In normal conditions, a fisherman endures 2-3 hours. But the wind did not stop, the waves did not cease, and the shore remained impossible. For you to have a real idea of what this means, consider the following. A professional rowing athlete manages to maintain maximum effort for about 7 minutes before entering severe exhaustion. The disciples were not athletes trained with perfect technique. They were fishermen, men accustomed to heavy work, yes, but not to continuous effort against relentless resistance for 9 hours straight. With every hour that passed, muscular acidity increased. Lactic acid accumulated. Arms began to fail. Tendons screamed. The Gospel of Mark adds an impressive detail. It says that Jesus, from the height of the mountain where he was praying, saw that the disciples were straining at rowing. The Greek word used here is basanezomenos, from the same root as torture. He was observing. He saw the effort. He saw the exhaustion. He saw every muscle yielding. And even so, he did not descend immediately. Why? Keep that question. The answer comes later. Between 3 and 6 in the morning, when the human body is already in collapse, when glucose levels have plummeted, when the mind can barely reason, something happens. A figure emerges walking upon the sea, and the reaction of the disciples is not admiration. It is absolute terror. They scream. Matthew uses the word tarasso to describe their state, the same word used to describe violently agitated waters. The disciples did not think of a miracle. They thought of death. They said, "It is a ghost." In the Jewish thought of the time, nocturnal apparitions upon the water meant one thing: imminent tragedy. Then the voice crosses the wind. "Be of good cheer, it is I. Be not afraid." The phrase in Greek is even more impactful than it seems. "It is I" corresponds to ego eimi, the same construction that God used in the burning bush when Moses asked his name. Jesus did not say, "It is I, your friend." He said the equivalent to "I am." In the middle of the chaos, the voice that echoed was the same that opened the Red Sea, and it is in this moment that Peter does something inexplicable. He does not ask for the wind to stop. He does not ask for Jesus to enter the boat and end all that nightmare. He does not ask for explanations about how it was physically possible for someone to walk upon liquid water. Peter makes a request that defies all logic of survival. "Lord, if it be thou, bid me come unto thee on the water." Stop. Read again. The boat, however fragile it might be, was the only solid object in kilometers of roiling sea. It was the only thing between those men and death by drowning. Any sensible person would ask for the danger to end, would ask for safety, would ask that Jesus come to them. Peter asks to get out. Faced with an impossible vision, the majority of people would ask for a safe proof, a sign that could be evaluated from a distance, something that confirmed the identity of Jesus without demanding risk. Peter asks to participate in the impossible, does not want to watch from afar. He wants to experience with his own body. He wants to abandon the only available safety and walk upon that which should kill him. Jesus answers with a single word: "Come." This is the most dangerous invitation ever recorded in the scriptures. Without instructions, without guarantees, without time to think. One word, an imperative, a decision to be made in seconds. And now pay attention to what happens, because this is the most ignored moment of the entire story. The Greek text says that Peter came down from the boat. The word is katabas. It was not a jump. It was a deliberate descent, one foot first, then the other. He knew what he was doing. He had time to feel the edge of the boat. He had time to look down and see the black water waiting. He had time to change his mind. But he did not change. What Peter felt when his foot touched the surface is something that no human being before or after him experienced. The water did not turn to ice. It did not solidify. The text describes no alteration in the matter. The water continued being water, liquid, cold, unstable. What changed was not the matter. It was what sustained it. Try to imagine. The human body knows intuitively what happens when the foot touches water. The skin receptors expect submersion. The vestibular system prepares for the fall. The brain calculates the sinking. The entire experience of a whole life screams that you are going to sink. Modern neuroscience explains this with precision. When the human foot comes into contact with a surface, thousands of mechanoreceptors in the sole of the foot send signals to the brain about density, temperature, and resistance. The cerebellum processes this information in milliseconds and prepares the body for the adequate response. When the surface is water, The brain already knows what is going to happen even before it happens. It prepares the muscles for the impact. It prepares the lungs to hold air. It prepares the entire nervous system for the inevitable fall. But Peter's foot found resistance where none should exist. It was not a solid surface. It was something different, something that yielded slightly, as if the water recognized the weight but refused to let it fall. The temperature of the Sea of Galilee at night stays around 15 degrees, cold enough to contract muscles instantly, cold enough to make skin goosebump. Peter felt this cold invading every nerve ending. He felt the dampness rising up his ankles, soaking the hem of his tunic. He felt the night wind cutting his face, now completely exposed outside the protection of the boat. And he did not sink. He walked. He did not float. He did not glide. He took real steps, with transfer of weight from one leg to another, with movement of hips to maintain balance, with muscular tension in the calves to propel each step. The human body cannot walk without a fixed reference. The balance system depends on a stable ground to calibrate each movement, but there was only water in constant motion and a luminous figure a few meters ahead. Each step Peter took was a challenge to physics. The foot descended, touched the unstable surface, found sufficient resistance and propelled the body forward. The wind continued blowing. The waves continued rising. The darkness continued absolute, except for the presence of Jesus. Peter was not walking in controlled conditions. He was traversing chaos with his own feet. How many steps did he take? The text does not specify 5, 10, 20, perhaps more. We do not know. What we know is the exact moment when everything changed. Matthew writes, "But when he saw the wind boisterous, he was afraid." The word for saw is blepon, conscious visual perception. Peter diverted his eyes. He looked at the waves around. He saw the white foam on the top of the crests, the whirlpools spinning, the fury of the sea in its full extent. Perhaps a larger wave passed close. Perhaps the wind blew stronger for an instant. Something made Peter take his eyes off Jesus and put them on the circumstances. And in the instant the attention changed place, the body responded to what it always knew. Water does not sustain human weight. He began to sink. But here is a crucial detail that the majority of people do not notice. The Greek text uses the present infinitive for to sink. This indicates a gradual process, not an instant fall. Peter did not disappear all at once under the waves. He went down little by little. First, the feet sank completely. Then the ankles, the shins, the knees, the water that seconds before sustained him miraculously now, pulled downward with the same gravitational force as always, the same force that sank all human bodies since the beginning of times. The panic must have been absolute. The contrast between walking on water and sinking in it happened in a matter of seconds. The same sea, the same night, the same body, but a completely different experience, and the scream that came out was not elaborate. "Lord, save me." 3 words, without theology, without explanation, without promises. Just the rawest truth possible. "I am sinking. I cannot save myself. I need you." This is perhaps the most honest prayer in the entire Bible. Jesus' answer was immediate. The text says that he immediately stretched forth his hand. The Greek word is eutheos, without interval of time. Jesus' hand was already moving before the scream ended. There was no pause for reflection. There was no wait for Peter to feel the consequences. The willingness to save did not depend on merit. It depended only on the cry. But Jesus asked a question. "O thou of little faith, wherefore didst thou doubt?" Pay attention. Jesus did not say man without faith. He said little faith. The difference is enormous. A man without faith would never have left the boat. A man of little faith leaves, walks, and then remembers he is doing the impossible. Peter's faith was real. It was sufficient to take him out of the boat, but it was not sustained. And here comes the revelation that almost no one notices. Jesus did not ask, "Why did you look at the wind?" He asked, "Why did you doubt?" The diversion of the gaze was a symptom. The doubt was the cause. Peter did not sink because he looked at the waves. He looked at the waves because he was already doubting, and the doubt fed on what the eyes confirmed. The two entered the boat together, and in the instant they stepped into the vessel, the wind ceased, completely, at once. 9 hours of storm simply stopped. The silence after the roar, the calm after the chaos. And then something happened that rarely happened. The disciples prostrated themselves and said, "Of a truth, thou art the Son of God." The Greek word for prostrated is proskinio. It is not a casual reverence, it is worship, the same term used to describe the worship due exclusively to God. Jewish men of the 1st century, raised since childhood in the most rigorous monotheistic tradition of the ancient world, educated to never bow before any human being, now prostrated themselves before Jesus, recognizing in him something that transcended humanity. They had seen Jesus heal the sick. They had seen him cast out demons. They had just witnessed the multiplication of loaves. But none of those miracles produced this specific reaction. Something in that walk upon the waters revealed a truth that the other signs had not managed to communicate with the same force. Why was this miracle different from all others? In the other miracles, Jesus acted upon creation. He healed bodies, he multiplied food, he cast out demons. But walking on water was different. It was dominating creation, absolutely. Psalm 77 says about God, "Thy way is in the sea." Job chapter 9 declares that only God treadeth upon the waves of the sea. When Jesus walked upon Galilee, he was not just performing a miracle. He was fulfilling descriptions that Scripture reserved exclusively for the Creator. But there is more. Jesus not only walked upon the water, he invited Peter to walk together. He shared the impossible. No other miracle involved a human being doing the same thing Jesus was doing in the moment. No one multiplied loaves with him. No one healed together with him. But Peter walked upon the water together with him. And the other 11? They remained in the boat. It is easy to criticize Peter for having sunk. The story is almost always told like this. Peter doubted, Peter failed, Peter needed to be rescued. But before criticizing, stop for a second and think about what the others did. Nothing. Andrew, Peter's brother, remained seated. James and John, the sons of thunder, who later would ask to sit on the right and left of Jesus in the kingdom, did not move. Philip, who had just witnessed the multiplication of the loaves, stood watching. Bartholomew, Matthew, Thomas, James, son of Alphaeus, Simon the Zealot, Judas, son of James. All saw the same figure. All heard the same voice. All received implicitly the same invitation when Jesus said, "Come." None came down. None risked. None experienced the glory of walking upon the water, but also none experienced the humiliation of sinking in it. They stayed safe inside the boat, dry, protected, and completely ignorant about what it is like to step on the impossible. When the wind ceased, Peter was soaked from head to toe. The others were dry. Which of the 12 learned more that night? Peter felt in his own feet what it means to be sustained by the impossible. He felt in his own body what happens when faith is interrupted. He felt in his own lungs the desperate scream that only one who is really sinking manages to give. He felt on his own skin the firm touch of the hand that saves at the last possible second. The other 11 watched everything. From inside the boat, they saw Peter go down. They saw Peter walk. They saw Peter sink. They saw Jesus stretch forth his hand, but none of them felt the cold water on their feet. None of them experienced the impossible becoming ground. None of them knew the sensation of the miracle interrupted by doubt. The others watched. Peter lived. And perhaps that is the fundamental difference between faith that observes from afar and faith that participates from up close. One is safe, the other is transformative. The entire episode lasted probably less than 10 minutes. From the appearance of Jesus until everyone entered the boat. Less than 10 minutes. But these minutes echo for 2,000 years in sermons, paintings, songs, books, and almost always with the same focus: Peter's failure, the sinking, the doubt that interrupted the miracle. But perhaps the focus is wrong. Before sinking, Peter walked. Before screaming, he took real steps upon liquid water. Before being a man of little faith, he was the only one with sufficient faith to leave the boat. Those few seconds of walking upon the water proved something that human logic cannot explain, and that 2,000 years of Theological debate have not managed to exhaust. The impossible has ground when the eyes are in the right place. Peter was not chosen for being brave or prepared. He was chosen for being impulsive, human, the type that acts before calculating, and perhaps that is exactly what the scene teaches. Faith does not wait for ideal conditions. It does not demand absence of wind. It does not need a calm sea. It demands only a direction for the gaze. Remember the question that remained unanswered? Why did Jesus not descend immediately when he saw the disciples straining? He could have calmed the wind from afar. He could have appeared in the first hour before exhaustion took over. He could have avoided all the suffering of that night. But he did not do that. He observed. He waited. He let them row until they could no longer. Perhaps because some lessons are only learned at the limit. Perhaps because faith that has never been tested does not know what it is capable of. Perhaps because it was necessary that they arrive at the point of total physical and emotional exhaustion, to recognize that the only solution would not come from inside the boat. It would come walking towards them upon the waves. Peter's story is not about failure. It is about the only man who had the courage to discover where his own limits were, and more important, to discover what happens when those limits meet Christ. The question the episode leaves is not if the water sustained Peter. It is for how long each of us manages to keep our eyes fixed before remembering the wind around, before noticing the waves that rise up, before returning to trust only in what the body knows and logic confirms. Peter's crossing lasted seconds. But those seconds prove something that 2,000 years of theology cannot explain completely. There exists a place between the boat and Christ where the laws of physics bow before something greater, where water behaves as it should never behave, where the impossible becomes temporarily possible, and he who dares to step there, even if he sinks afterwards, discovers a truth that he who stays in the boat will never know. The miracle is not in the matter, it is in the sustenance,